All right, baby. Starting this puppy on time. There's too much good stuff to talk about it. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining live. Start strolling in here. Let me know how we're sounding, how we're looking, all that fun stuff. This is Casual Krakoa. I'm Dave, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. We're going to talk about X Deaths of Wolverine. Let's give people a second to scroll in here. Let me know if audio, video is coming through all right. And then we'll roll into this puppy on Casual Krakoa. We're going to be talking about X Deaths of Wolverine number 3. Now, I did, in fact, link to the video here in the comments if you're here with us on the live chat. I have a Kraken Krakoa up on this comic as well. This is a big, good, wild comic. I'm excited to do a post-game report and talk about it all with all of you today. This is definitely, I want this to be an open conversation between friends, between pals, as we talk about, what questions do you have? What things do you want to know? What do you want to focus on? What do you want to talk about? Because this was a huge comic, and there's so many directions we can go with theories and predictions and whatnot. I've got some big ones definitely in the Kraken Krakoa. So if you haven't already watched that. I definitely recommend doing so when we're done here. But in the meantime, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Casual Krakoa. I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of Comic Book Herald. You can find all my stuff on comicbookherald.com. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Comic Book Herald, and of course here on the YouTube channel. If you like these live streams, if you like the Kraken Krakoa series, if you like talking X-Men with me, please like, subscribe, share, comment on the channel. All that stuff helps me out and helps new people find these as they go live, which are super fun to do, right? I do these every Wednesdays after the X-Men comics come out, circa 5:15 Central Standard Time, when I am off of work. And then we get into it. Let's see, I'm hearing volume a bit low in the chat. Let's see what's going on there. It looks decent on my end. Let me know if other people are having any issues with that, and I will do what I can, okay? But it looks all right as far as I'm concerned. I could turn up my gain, but then things get weird. Things might get a little feedbacky, a little Metal Machine music, Lou Reed style. But we will see. All right. Now, as we're talking about these comics today, definitely get in your thoughts and questions in the chat. I want this to be as question-based and as responsive to those of you who are here live as we can make it. I definitely want to hear what other people are thinking about the comics today. I really want to hear some other theories because I've spent like 2 hours thinking about this. I read it once very quickly, and then I dove into making a Kraken Krakoa video, okay? So it's not like I have studied this ad nauseum. Nonetheless, I feel like I have a really good sense of what happened. I saw some relative confusion on Twitter amongst some individuals. I felt like I got it. I feel like I got it. But again, I could easily be wrong. So I am very open to what's going on in your heads, in your thoughts, with theories and predictions and interpretations. Okay, so get those in the chat. I will grab as many of these as I can. Of course, you can chat amongst yourselves as well. I appreciate that you do. Just be kind and be polite to those around you. All right, let's start talking X Deaths of Wolverine number 3. This was the comic. This was the comic, baby. Okay, this is the one that I wanted this event to have so badly. Not the specifics, but just the size, the scope, the ambition, and the willingness, and I say this in Kraken Krakoa, to put their foot on the gas, pump it forward, okay? Now, some people, I guarantee, got whiplash, right? We're sitting there cruising along like, oh yeah, I get this Wolverine event, X Lives, they're doing the Terminator thing, okay, it's just Terminator with Wolverine, Moira's on the run, boom, foot on the gas, here we go. Everybody's like, what? Wait a minute, what? We're messing with timelines and lifelines, and Moira is what? Okay, this was big. This was exciting. We got writer Benjamin Percy, artist Federico Vicentini, colors by Diego Lima, letters by Corey Pettit. This was the issue. This is the best one of the bunch, by far, by far. X Deaths of Wolverine, I think, is several orders of magnitude better than X Lives of Wolverine, but X Deaths of Wolverine number 3 in particular, was some real good stuff. Now, for those of you who are worried about this sort of thing, we're going to spoil the comic today, okay? We're going to spoil this comic book on this chat. We're going to talk about it in detail. We're going to talk about theories. We're going to talk about interpretations. We're going to talk about what is actually happening here, because again, I think it is a comic that is potentially open to confusion and misinterpretation. But we're going to talk about all of that. So if you're worried about that, definitely go read the comic and then come back if you are so inclined. Let's get into it, okay? Moira's post-mutant plan is to backing it up immediately. There's two sort of avenues of this, and I break it down in Casual Krakoa. The first is Faye Logan, the phalanx Wolverine that is introduced in Deaths of Wolverine #1. That character is hunting Moira. Now, to this point, we haven't known, does he want to kill her? Does he want to work with her? Etc. What's revealed in this issue is seemingly definitely wants to kill Moira. And now we understand why, and we'll talk about that. Professor X, because they're busy, him and Jean are busy sending Wolverine through time on their Professor X, protection tour, fighting off Omega Red and all that stuff going on in X Lives. They call the real Wolverine, Laura Kinney, along with Gabby and Deken. We get the Wolverine family, which, thank you, finally, definitely need the full Wolverine team if we're going to do a Wolverine-sized event. That was much appreciated. And then the second wing of this continues the story of Moira. Okay, Deaths of Wolverine has been a stealth Moira miniseries of sorts, right? Following up, hot on the heels of Inferno, of course, where Moira is chased out of Krakoa. Mystique and Destiny want to kill her. Doug, Warlock, Krakoa, they give her like a window to say, all right, fine, run, try and do your thing. And now Moira's out doing her thing, and lo and behold, it looks like maybe that was a big mistake. Okay, it looks like maybe that was a huge mistake by Doug and company for Mutant Kind. But we're going to talk about that. I'm seeing the comment here. Brandon writes, Percy wrote X Lives to make X Deaths look better. That's a good theory. That's a good theory. Definitely, like, you write one half of the event that's like, oh, this is okay. And then the next half of the event looks amazing by comparison. Interesting theory. I like it. Let's dive right into the big stuff. And the Moira of it all. Okay, I think we have to talk about the big stuff first, and that's frankly the only thing that I really want to dig into on this live stream. So Moira's on the run. She finally gets a sense, and this is something that I said I wanted to see. She finally gets a chance to like strategize and actually be like, okay, what is my plan here? And her plan is to kidnap, I believe it's Arnab Chakladar, this CEO, tech guru, leader of like a fake Google in the Marvel Universe. They're in Mountain View, California. I think they're called Epiphany. And he's an expert in artificial intelligence and like memory implants. Okay. And Moira kidnaps him and literally tells him everything, tells him the whole story, or so she says, right? Or maybe a liar. And says like, okay, and what I want you to do is to fully embrace the evolution of augmented intelligence, aka human plus machine, aka put Moira's consciousness into a machine robot body, aka Moira's making herself a Sentinel backup. Okay, so like for the entire Krakoa era, Moira's been Mutant Kind's secret weapon, and now as she has been cast out and she has been freed, I think she would say, of her mutant ability of reincarnation, she is basically like going full heel. I mean, it's a full heel turn. Moira is now the ultimate enemy of the Krakoa era. And she is working with this tech guru, this whiz, to build basically a Nimrod body, or perhaps more likely, an Omega Sentinel body. Okay? And we'll talk about that one. This is a huge deal. I mean, this is a big deal. I think the implications here of making Moira the #1 antagonist of the Mutant Nation, they're massive. They're absolutely massive, given that Moira was also like House of X #2. Run it back to Hickman kicking off House of X and Powers of 10 with Pepe Larraz, of course, and RB Silva. And House of X #2 is the turning point, right? It is the moment of like, oh, here's what we're doing. Okay, this is the retcon. This is the trick to make this super special, to make this a moment in an X era that guys like me are going to be up on live streams talking about 3 years into the future because that comic was so good, right? And what that does, X Deaths of Wolverine #3 captures some of that energy. And it does it by flipping the switch. It does it by flipping the script and saying, this person we thought was the key to mutant salvation this whole time is actually their #1 antagonist, possibly their destroyer. And like that's been a void to degrees. in the Krakoa era. Like, who is the actual number one antagonist? And part of the challenge, I think, that the creative teams have faced and what this era faces is the standard antagonists of X-Men comics. Many of them are also mutants. Well, they're all welcome on Krakoa, right? So, like, Magneto is not our ultimate threat. Apocalypse cannot be our ultimate threat. Mr. Sinister, Mystique, on and on and on down the list, right? Those characters can't be our ultimate threats. So, of course, obviously, we move it to, okay, well, it's Nimrod, and it's Sentinels, and it's machines and artificial intelligence, which works, but in the Krakoa era, like in contemporary modern Marvel timelines, those machines and that augmented reality stuff, it's all kind of like, oh, it's gonna be the thing that destroys us. Down the road, in the future, it's gonna be the thing that destroys mutants. But in the present, it's like equal. It's like we have a chance, right? Like we saw in Inferno, the Hickman event, most recently, Magneto can hold his own against a Nimrod, right? It's not until he gets distracted by, sad little Charlie that he gets taken down. Like there are ways that mutants can still win against those type of antagonists, in an organization like Orchis, which is new. Spinning all of that to say, actually, the real antagonist here, the real threat to mutant kind in the future is now what we thought was the linchpin. We thought this character was the central piece of mutant salvation, of Krakoa as a successful nation, because she has all this knowledge. She has thousands of years of history behind her. We thought it was Moira. Actually, she's the ultimate antagonist. That's amazing. That's really great. It's really, really smart. And it's not a subtle turn here either, right? Moira has a quote here. People certainly think of them as gods, referring to mutants, but they're devils. She has fully turned, and is going back to ultimately her plan was to try and cure mutant kind in an effort to bring them with her, I think ultimately an ascension with the phalanx, right? Into a dominion or whatever. Like Moira's version of saving mutant kind, I think, was curing them all, but then kindly allowing them to live forever with her. Because that's Moira's game. Moira's game now, because of the life she's led, is pure survival. It is pure, permanent, perpetual survival. That's what she's playing for. That's what her lifelines have taught her. That's what she's trying to get to. And the only outcome, or the only means to that outcome that she hasn't explored, is actually taking mutants out of the equation. She's been trying to protect them every step of the way. Every lifeline since Lifeline 3. Okay? Lifeline 3, if we remember, is when she tried to cure mutants the first time. And we learn in House of X, and we see it again in Inferno. That's when Mystique and Destiny show up, tell her, don't do this, we'll see it coming, and then literally burn her alive. And the fear of being burned alive, of having her perpetual permanent survival taken away, has colored everything she's done, Life's 4, now through 10. You could definitely interpret this, that the only reason Moira is in any way interested in the survival of mutants, and is actually working hard to try for that, is because Destiny, primarily, put the fear of God into her, right? And said, I will end you. I will know you're coming, and I will put you down before you can turn on me. Why Destiny doesn't see all these things coming in this lifeline, I feel like is still an interesting thing to explore. I feel like there's a lot of meat on that bone, right, to get into. But nonetheless, that's the reason Moira's working pro-mutant. It's not because she wants to. It's not because she believes in it. She tells Charles Xavier, you're dreaming the wrong dream. She does not share that dream. So that piece of it, on a very macro, big picture level, I feel is very believable. And I think it's one of the things that actually this comic, I would imagine some of the response is the worst to, or the most difficult to, right? Where it's like, oh, that feels fast. Moira's turn from the secret weapon in a Krakoan no place to they're all devils maybe feels quick. And in some ways I agree with that, because the build up to the moment, purely textually, purely what's in the story in the comics, is not super effective. Actually, I would go on to say, and I've said this repeatedly, is like one of the most I think one of the most obvious strategic failures of this entire era and of Hickman's plotting and then him leaving, right? Is like there is no Moira content. There is nothing exploring what she's thinking, what she's doing, what she's about from House Powers until Inferno. You know, there's a 2-year gap. And for a time it seemed like, okay, like sit on your secrets, we'll get to him eventually. But then the get to him eventually coincides with Hickman leaving and now a turnover and a transition to Percy, you know, to writer Benjamin Percy, and now he has to do something with it. So I don't envy being in that position, right? Because now there's 2 ways you can go. You can sit on it and say, okay, I guess now we better develop Moira because that hasn't been done. Or you can put your foot on the gas and just go. And that's what they do here. And frankly, I appreciate it. Frankly, I appreciate it because that has been lacking in a stagnant reign of X. This is the thing they needed to do. It's the thing that the X-Men line needs. And they did it. And they did it well. So I can see reaction to being like, wow, I am out. I do not like this idea of Moira being the ultimate enemy of mutant kind. Like that is not what I thought this story was, but that's why it's a twist. like I didn't think that's what this story was either, necessarily. You know, that's exciting. I love that about it. So I definitely want to see here some reaction to what do we think about the Moira turn? You know, what do we think about the fact that she is like full on the enemy of mutant kind? And like, so the other piece of this narratively, right? What happens in the issue is not only is she like, I want to build this robot augmented intelligence backup for my 11th life, as she calls it. And like Percy's just like, he's just doing the thing, right? He is playing all the beats, all the Powers of 10 references, all this stuff. I love it. But she's like, not only am I doing that, but we actually get a glimpse here into a year 1000 where Moira is still alive. She is enjoying, reveling in killing the last of the mutants, who happens to be Wolverine. It's a total inversion of what we saw in Moira's 6th life in Powers of 10. And I want to talk about, and I talked about this in the Crack and Krakoa, like, is this Moira's 6th life? Is this a future timeline? What is this exactly? We'll talk about that. But we see that detail, right? This Moira is loving the chance to end mutant kind now because of the ways that they betrayed her and spurned her. What are the reactions to that from all of you? Is it too much? Is it too fast? Is it exciting? I am curious. I'm seeing the question here, is it a turn though? Yeah, absolutely. It is absolutely a turn for Moira. I mean, she has been, again, like the dearth of Moira content makes it difficult. But the what we see in Inferno is still Moira trying to work with Charles and Magneto, and then they don't listen to her. And they reveal what she views as a betrayal, that, you know, they've been tracking her and these sorts of things. So like now we know it's not a turn, but throughout this entire era, there was not a real clear reason to believe that like okay, there was reason to believe she had something secret in mind, right? There was reason to believe Moira could eventually turn and drop a bomb like this, because she's so secretive, because she was so insistent that a precog not be present, that destiny not be resurrected, that her plans not be found out, right? So yes, there were reasons to believe that Moira would absolutely have something that would not be favorable to mutant kind. But like, I think the thing here is though, I don't think this isn't what she was planning. You know, like what she was planning was the cure and then bringing mutants with her on Ascension. This is not that. This is her being chased out, and now she's just mad. like Moira's plan, like this level of turn of her feeling betrayed and mad and wanting, to the point where in the future timeline with Wolverine, she wants to end mutants. That's new. That's not a turn I saw coming. And there's a data page in this issue too, which is, you know, the quote is like, I have forever, or I am forever, or however the phrasing is. I wanted to bring you all with me. You chose not to. I think she believes that. You know, Moira is playing God, but like, again, like her circumstances make that possible. Like her circumstances justify some of the haughtiness and the attitude, because like that's the life she's lived. I mean, everyone around her, like when you're reliving lifelines, like people around you aren't people. You know, she's not going to have the same attitudes that she has, because when she dies, they'll just pop up again. You know, they're respawned in a new video game. You know, like you just have a totally different perspective on things. And that's definitely what we're playing with here. Let's see, what are some other people saying? I like it because it also partly the fault of mutants. Yeah, it's another good example where mutant kind, like, they did betray her and they did mess things up. And you could blame, Mystique and Destiny right now are like actually maybe the ones doing the thing that's best for mutant kind in trying to assassinate her and break Krakoan law. So you could blame Doug in sort of this weird inversely pragmatic thing. I'm glad she's an enemy, hoping she does not side with X-Men or Orcus. It seems like Orcus is definitely potentially in the cards. Comment here, wonder if this is what Hickman was planning or something else. I would bet dollars to donuts this is part of the plan. I would be pretty surprised if this was going off book from the Hickman Bible or whatever. All the interviews and all this fun stuff is basically him saying, okay, I handed them my notes. They can do whatever they want. I would guess this piece of it specifically is part of the plan. And I think some other stuff we're going to talk about here in terms of the timelines and all that definitely connects with that theory. Seeing here, Moira always does this, bro. Look at the history. What are you talking about? These circumstances in which Moira, the artist formerly known as Moira McTaggart, exists in this era are so different from the comics previously in X-Men that, like, the history of the character is not especially relevant. The contexts are so different, right? And just the things we know now. It's part of why I would absolutely love a book that looked at those previous pasts and the continuity of X-Men comics of Moira through the lens of what we know now and what we know about the character now. But I think that's a bit of a stretch to feel like, oh, this is super obvious. Just look at the history. So yeah, let's keep the comments coming. But I'm not buying that one for sure. But that's fine. That's fine. That's what I want to see. Like, people are going to have different thoughts and different perspectives on this, and that's what I want to hear. I want to hear how people are reacting because this is a big one. So, and the other thing I want to tap into is, like, for this to work, for this turn to work, you have to do a lot of work as the reader. I do think that's true, right? Like, it's on us to make this work, which, is, I think, a failure of kind of the approach to this point. But again, it's a sunk cost, and it's doable. It is doable. Moira has reason to want out of mutantdom. Again, like, that is the thing that she wanted to do first, was to cure what she views as a curse. Like having to relive every lifeline and see everything you love destroyed every time. She's like, I want out. I want out. I want that cure. And the only reason she's not doing it is because this fear of being burned. And look at stuff too. Like, look at what mutantdom in Moira's life is. It's her own curse. It's her son in this lifeline, eugenically created as an Omega level mutant. You have Proteus, but, like, her son is like, he can't do anything. He can't enjoy life. He can't control his powers at all. So you have another case where mutantdom is, like, absolutely restrictive and brutal. Moira has to, whatever. I won't go into the eugenics of creating him, but it's like, Proteus has a miserable life up until the point when he is needed for Krakoa. Moira's view of mutantdom is not a positive one. Mutants want to kill her, in Destiny and Mystique. Like, her view of mutantdom is not necessarily or primarily a positive one, So I think you have to sort of apply that to make this situation work. Again, the comics are not really doing that for us, which I think is a problem, but it works if you do. I do think it works if you do. All right. So let's see. What else do we got? Over and over. Okay. Given the reference points, one of the biggest questions here is when, where, and how is the Moira and Logan year 1000 future happening? Okay, so Faye Logan here, it's actually revealed that, like, he is, in fact, a Logan Wolverine from the future. It's not like he's not totally taken over by the phalanx, right? He's got that techno-organic circuitry going on. But he knows Laura and he knows Decan and he's himself, and he looks sad when he's talking about, the fact that he had seen them die. Like, he's clearly from a Days of Future Past style timeline and all that stuff. But then we get the actual glimpse. I thought it was going to be left up to our imagination. We get the actual pages showing us this year 1000 thing with Moira and Logan. And it's totally inverted, basically. Kind of sort of based on what we had seen in Powers of 10, right? When we actually get this lifeline revealed, right? Like, you get a dark mirror version of it. As I see it, and again, I talk about this in Crack Krakoa, we have three options. Okay? We have three options. One is this is Moira's sixth life, like the first time we saw this timeline, and it's playing out totally differently. Or it's playing, maybe it's the real story of what happened. Okay, first option. Second option is it's a future timeline in this Moira's 10th life, what we know to be the Krakoa era. The third possible future, or the third possible option, is it's the Moira's 10th life, but it's like 10A or 10B on a timeline, right? And it's a different timeline alternate from the one that is happening now, possibly the one Omega-Sentinel comes from, right? So like that theory of, okay, we have Lifeline 10, and then we have 10A and 10B in various timelines. That comes from Inferno number 3, where Omega-Sentinel reveals she came from a different timeline to this timeline in order to found Orcus and to prevent the future where mutants always win. Okay, so like as I see it, those are our three options for what this timeline is. I think we can rule out that this is Lifeline 6. Okay, I think we can rule out that this is actually Moira's 6th life. There are two reasons for that. One, Lifeline travel. Characters going from one of Moira's lifelines to another has not been shown in any capacity. Shouts to Rasputin and Zorn, but we've never seen it. Okay, maybe it'll happen with a black hole, but right now it's not happening. Okay, which I'd be into. I'd be into if that was the option, but that has not happened. So like that makes it difficult, right? But then the second piece of it that I actually think is more pertinent is on the credits page, they show this Logan. They blur out his name, they redact his name, but he's from Timeline X. He's from Timeline X, same as all the characters that we're talking about. So he is from the same timeline. So he has come back, like for sure, if that credits page is to be believed and I'm understanding it correctly, from Timeline X to the past. The question then is he from Timeline A, B? Is it an introduction of a C? That all could still be played with. My best theory here, and this was my theory initially from issue 1, was he's from Timeline B, which is the Omega-Sentinel timeline, and he has come back to make sure that Timeline B comes to fruition, because that's the timeline where mutants always win. Okay? What I think is more likely now is he's a Timeline A Logan dealing with the future that is now in response to the presence of Timeline B Omega-Sentinel, and in that future, mutants do lose. Because Orcus is created, Orcus is a presence, and maybe, obviously, Moira's going to have a role in that, in destroying and killing mutant kind. And I'm sure we'll find out more about that here. So my working theory is sort of validated, although in a different way than I expected, which is cool, which is I think this Wolverine is just from the future. Like in the simplest terms, he's from the same timeline, he's from the future, he came back to the past, and now he is here to try and change what happens, because what happens because of Moira, and because of her rage at Krakoa and putting her consciousness in a Nimrod Sentinel techno-organic being, it's horrible for mutants. Okay? And he has tried to come back to stop that. Now, the how of how he's tried to come back remains very interesting. It remains very, very interesting to me, right? You've got what we see here is Logan is at this end of days thing. The phalanx are ready for ascension. Moira then shows up. Logan doesn't even know she's alive. Moira then shows up, blasts him with her sentinel cannon arm right down the gut, leaves him for dead, right? It's an inversion of the way Life 6 ends in Powers of 10, where Wolverine does that to Moira, but like helpfully, in his Wolverine way, to send her on to the next lifeline as needed. But here she's trying to kill Wolverine. She is leaving him for dead. How does he then acquire phalanx circuitry and time travel to come back and do this? That's an interesting question. What other players potentially are involved to make that happen? We heard in the Omega-Sentinel lifeline something like a trickster titan. Could we be playing with galactic intelligences here that might have stakes or just be, messing with reality, right? Who knows? But there's a lot that could be going on. I'm seeing here, okay, and then the other piece of this is the theory that kind of just like washed over me as I was doing the Crack and Krakoa video, and I'm seeing people reference here. I've heard people reference this theory before. I didn't super buy into it until now. It feels like kind of a certainty. And this theory is that Omega-Sentinel is, in fact, Moira-Sentinel. Okay? Moira X and Omega-Sentinel are the same person. It's the same picture. Okay. How does this work? Well, we see in this issue that Moira is trying to place her consciousness into a robot Sentinel body. Okay? She's becoming an Omega Sentinel. Seems like that is something that is pretty clear. Could be a Nimrod, you could call it a Nimrod, you could call it a Sentinel. Omega Sentinel-ish. Okay? She is moving in that direction. Okay? We know that she hates mutant kind at this point, right? That is the implication. Could that turn around because she is herself a mutant? Yes. Is that a really messy, complicated thing to be playing with a character? This sort of self-hating mutant. Yeah, it is, right? There's a lot there that kind of needs to be dealt with. But purely in terms of like, okay, so she's trying to make herself an Omega Sentinel. The original Omega Sentinel, who we've seen in these comics, we've seen in the pages of House of X, we've seen in the pages of Powers of 10, and then of course we see in Inferno revealed as, the ultimate leader of Orcus, this person from a future where mutants always win. That Omega Sentinel has been called Karima by Nightcrawler I think in House of X. Okay, the Omega Sentinel character is Karima Shapinder throughout X-Men continuity, throughout X-Men history. This is a character, I think, created by Chris Claremont in his 2000s run. It's a character utilized by the likes of Mike Carey in his X-Men run. Karima Shapinder is a character with a known history. Nightcrawler calls her Karima, but I don't think there's really anything that proves that that's who she is. Aside from like being called that name and responding. That could be a fake out. That doesn't necessarily prove that that's who that is. The other big thing that suggests that Moira is in fact Omega Sentinel, or that Omega Sentinel is a Moira from timeline 10B, is she uses the same kind of language as this Moira X. Moira famously in House of X and Powers of 10 says mutants always lose. We always lose. Then you see it inverted with Omega Sentinel and Inferno. Mutants always win. Okay? That's a Hickman thing in terms of repetition of language, in terms of sending a signal back to call back to something you've done previously to sort of make it resonate. So it's a trick he pulls frequently, and it doesn't always, or frankly almost ever, mean it's the same person saying those things. But because there's now these connective dots, it could mean that. It could mean that. So I think we're very likely looking at Moira-Sentinel in timeline 10B losing to the mutants, going back in time to found Orcus, and set up a timeline where that other timeline's Moira can succeed and wipe out Wolverine in this future that we've seen. Okay? Do I need clearly a whiteboard behind me and like a Charlie Day thing of Post-its and sticky tack and all that stuff? Clearly. I get where this gets messy, and I don't know that I'm explaining that clearly, but I think there's a real good chance Moira-Sentinel is what we're looking at. And that idea alone is so crazy. That is so wild. That Moira could be simultaneously founding Krakoa, the great salvation in future mutant kind, and be the Omega Sentinel setting up Orcus in order to destroy that Krakoa. That's nuts. That's absolutely nuts, right? That theory is great. Like, that is twist upon twist. The Omega Sentinel thing was already cool in Inferno number 3. That, oh, by the way, it was Omega Sentinel all along. She was in the background, hardly doing anything, but actually she's from a different timeline, and she's seen this whole thing play out, and she founded Orcus, and this is why, right? You take that, and then you just up it to another level. And now it's like, oh, and she's the same as Moira. I mean, come on. That's so good. That's so good if that's what's happening. And there's every indication that it is. I just think, like, it's brilliant. And it definitely is of a piece with the types of twists and turns and big ideas that Hickman has been known for, right? If we're going to say, okay, this is from the Hickman Bible, this is from the plan, and Benjamin Percy here is the one who gets to implement it. And he's the one who gets to hit the gas and say, yeah, let's hit that beat. Let's reveal that. I hope that's what it is now, because that is so nuts. That is so big. I definitely want to hear what people are thinking about this idea, if they think that's what's happening. But it's definitely a thing that, I was putting the Kraken Krakoa together, and I'm looking at the visuals, and I see that robot body, and it's like, oh, it's Moira-Sentinel. She's doing it. Like it's both of these things are her. I truly believe that at this point. I really think that's where we're going. So let's see. What are people saying? Let's take some questions and all this fun stuff. All right. The other pods are going to snip this idea for sure. For sure. And I want all of you to tell them you heard it here first. You heard it here on Comic Book Herald. You know, I have not. I don't. I mean, I go on Twitter every now and again, so it's not like I'm scanning the web, but like I definitely have not seen a lot of other people talking about this. But again, I'm not super looking for it. So yeah, sure, I'll take credit. That absolutely works for me. This event requires you to have been reading X-Men for 2 years. Like that's how comics work. Let's see. I think we'd actually need Hickman to tell if that was how it's supposed to be. I don't think so. Like I don't need Hickman to come back and validate any of these ideas. Because, like, here's the thing. Whether it's Hickman's idea or not, it's a cool idea. Like, if it's Percy's, cool. Good on Percy. If it's Hickman's, great. That's the level of craft that I've come to expect and hoped for when this whole thing started. But ultimately, the execution is down to Percy and Vicentini and the whole creative team here. You know what I mean? So, like, I guess it's not important to me that Hickman now validates anything the other X-Men creators are doing. They're either going to stick the landing and do well with it or not, or they're going to come up with their own ideas. And I guess just like the reality of the post-Hickman era on X-Men and into the Destiny of X now is like we just have to move past that, if you're going to continue to possibly enjoy these things. Otherwise, it's just going to be a perpetual state of lamenting what could have been, which, like, of course, like it's a huge what if. It's a huge what if, and it will always be kind of interesting. But at this point, I don't think I need that validation. Let's see, what else do we got? Is it a good Wolverine story? I mean, that's the thing about X Deaths is like, no. To this point, no. It's a stealth Moira mini. It's like X Deaths is 3 issues out of 5 in, and it's not really trying to be a Wolverine story. This is the first issue where there's good Wolverine stuff, right? Like there's the Wolverine family, which is exciting and fun, and I like seeing them. I like seeing them in response to a Wolverine from the future, where mutants have been annihilated by Moira-Sentinel and has now these harrowing stories to tell them. So I think the next couple issues and this issue are going to make it a better Wolverine story for sure. And then it's like somehow has to connect the dots to all the stuff going on in X Lives of Wolverine. I mean, it'd be so weird if it didn't. X Lives of Wolverine is big time the Wolverine story. Like if you just like Wolverine history and continuity and all that stuff, that's what X Lives is doing. But that's the one I find way more boring. So I guess, I mean, honestly, like I'm kind of glad X Deaths isn't a big Wolverine story because that's not really the story that needs to be told. I don't think. It should, like, it's that Trial of Magneto thing. Like, could this just have been X Lives of Wolverine and a simultaneous 5-issue Moira series that interconnect? Like, yeah, that would have been more truth in advertising. Let's see. What else? What other questions? All right. So, what is your predictions by the end of the series? All right, so let's keep moving. So we talked about what timeline this is. Again, I think like to me, it feels very clear that it's not from the 6th lifeline. We're not doing lifeline travel. There could be variances in how many timelines we have available, but I feel like it's very realistic that it's simply from timeline A's future, but influenced by what happened with timeline B with Moira-Sentinel coming back the first time. I'm pretty confident in this theory at this point. Again, based on just how cool that would be, how fun it would be. Let's see, what questions do we have at the top? Oh, there was some interesting stuff here I saw from JJ asked before we got started. Reference to Ultimate this Phalanx Wolverine having the legacy virus, and the legacy virus coming into play as like maybe like Moira's ultimate revenge for the No Place giving her cancer, right, and stuff like this. I again, like I read this issue once, I read it fast. I didn't see any specific references to the legacy virus, right? I thought Wolverine's like wound and the reason he was sick was because his belly was blasted apart. Like that was my interpretation of that scene. So I don't know how much textual stuff there is here for like, oh, and the legacy virus is going to come into play. That said, that said, Moira is so connected to the legacy virus in X-Men history and the study of it. You have this whole build up to like she's the only human who dies of the legacy virus in X-Men continuity. So like bringing the legacy virus, which for those of you who don't know is this virus that like only kills mutants, basically for the longest time. It runs throughout like the entirety of the 90s basically. And then Moira, who's been researching it extensively with Charles Xavier, is the only one who seems to die. We now know based on House and Powers in the Hickman retcon that like, oh, she didn't actually die. It was a Shi'ar golem, it was this fake out, and she's been hiding away in Krakoa the whole time. But all that is to say, like, I think the legacy virus is gonna come back into play. I just don't know if that's actually been like textually touched upon here at all. But I would be shocked if it didn't come into play at all, honestly, just because of the character's closeness to it. And, some things you could explain away to be like, why was she looking at it so intensely, right? Moira is a scheming individual with thinking long-term, thinking macro. Why was she so obsessed with that, right? And I think you could bring that back into play in some pretty interesting ways. There was an interesting comment here. This is from Langdon. He said, before we started, overall, X-Deaths is a pretty good continuation of Hoxpox and Inferno. I would agree. But knowing we have a bunch of titles slated for April definitely lessens the stakes of this book. I actually had the opposite reaction, I think. I'm not bothered by the fact, like more comics are always coming, right? Is just kind of part of being a Marvel Comics fan. There's no conclusion, I think, to X-Deaths, even the way it's playing out now, that is like the end of Krakoa or like the end of the era, right? Like I guess we know that because there's all these Destiny of X books coming, but it also doesn't really feel like that kind of book. It feels like a long-term setup kind of book, right? Like Moira's going to get out of this and she's going to be waiting in the wings and she's going to be an antagonist lurking in the background and into the deep future. Like that's kind of my expectation of where we go with this, is not some cataclysmic, mutants versus Moira showdown. Like I don't think we're there yet. You know what I mean? Like that's going to be a later thing where it's revealed that like, oh snap, she's with Orcus now, and also she's an Omega Sentinel, and now there's a showdown, and there's all sorts of stuff you can do in the future. So I guess it doesn't. I don't know. To me, it's actually building stakes, I think, fairly effectively. I actually think it's ramping them back up for the Destiny of X, where now the era is more interesting. You've got Moira on the lam and as an antagonist in the background. That's going to be lurking over all these books, right? That's a thing Kieran Gillen can play with in Immortal X-Men in some really interesting ways. So I'm very curious to see now what's going to happen, because I actually do think it will make the Destiny of X more interesting, frankly. All right, what else do we got here in the comments? All right. Why would Moira need to cure mutants for ascension? Cable has the techno-organic virus, and Apocalypse is like a celestial cyborg. Let's look at the first part of that. Why would Moira need to cure mutants for ascension? It's a good question. I think the answer is that mutants will not make it to ascension if they are not cured. Okay? I think through Moira's histories and through her lifelines, what she sees time and time again is man v mutant v machine. And in all of her lifelines, mutants get exterminated. Mutants do not make it to Ascension. They do not make it to year 1000 with her and Wolverine accepted. So the reason for the cure, I would think, is then those mutants become humans. They can now coalesce with machines and become these augmented intelligences a la Homo Novissima. Could there be a more harmonious union of these three parties? Like, yes. Like, all three of them could come together, but every history she has seen, that does not happen. So I think that is the rationale for, like, I have to cure you to get you to that point, because otherwise mutants keep getting exterminated and I can't stop it. I think that's kind of the thinking. What other questions do we got? The retcon of her dying off can now be retconned that she did die because she was a mutant. Not following that. Move ahead. Do you think Moira and Abigail Brand will have some contact in the future? It will be interesting how openly Moira maybe teams up with an Orcus. Uh, to the point where, as Abigail Brand is like obviously now has connections at the end of Sword there. Um, I could see it. I could see it. I actually think it would probably be a smart thing to open up more Moira stuff. Have her more openly be connected to the likes of Orcus or just whatever she is scheming. Because the secrecy around Moira and keeping her just totally untouched, like I said, I think strategically was a massive miss by this line. So I don't want to go back to that. I definitely think that would be a mistake moving forward. All right. Okay. Okay, cool. So, I mean, it seems like broadly people are pretty into this comic. Like, it seems like this was pretty exciting. Like, I'm not alone in thinking, like, this was bombshell after bombshell. This was huge stuff. And it's the most exciting issue Percy has written in X Lives and X Death. Like, he really gets to play with the toys here, and that's been a thing up to this point where it's like, it's been that stagnation of feeling like, okay, we don't want to reveal too much in it or anything. Like, this was an issue where it's like, no, we're doing this. We're gonna move this forward. It brings back the House of X and Powers of 10 energy, where it's like, yeah, we're gonna like overthrow everything you think you know about mutants. Like, we're gonna think you think mutants are one thing, you think X-Men comics are one thing. We're gonna take it in a new direction. We're gonna surprise you. We're gonna play with this stuff, and it's gonna get weird and messy and good. Like, that's what X-Men comics need. That's what this era needs. And I think it's like the best comic Percy's ever written? Not necessarily, but it's definitely got the biggest ideas and the most essential stuff that is going to have ramifications and is going to matter going forward more so than anything we've read so far. And again, like, I think it is fair to come out of this and be like, I'm not feeling that. Like, I'm not feeling this turn for Moira. Again, like, I wish we had more time with Moira as a builder of Krakoa. Truly, like, I really think that series would have been really good. I would have loved to have seen history of X-Men comics through the lens of Moira and what she's thinking about. And again, there's certain things like, you got her studying the Destiny Diaries, but then still being, taken totally by surprise and not being referenced once in Inferno. And it's like, what has she actually been doing? What has she been planning for? Because this is like a fly by the seat of the pants, kind of like Salvation. Like, this wasn't the plan, I don't think. It was like, I don't think the plan was ever, oh, well, I don't really want to cure him. I want to get chased out of Krakoa and try to kidnap and hold this tech guy hostage. Like, this wasn't the plan. So I want to know. I wish we had that opportunity, but we don't. Like, that's just, those comics didn't happen. And I don't know that we can really go back now. Let's see. Jason says, I love your analysis in the show. Thank you. But I really dislike the heel turn. Yeah, fair. It's T2 with an underbaked villain turn. Do you think there's any way to redeem her character? Whew. Well, I mean, so Destiny still gives her the okay. So yes, I do actually. I think she's going to heel turn for a while. And then again, like, if we go back to what Destiny said in House and Powers, you have a 10 lives, possibly an 11th, if you make the right decision. Could the right decision, and this is something we've talked about on here, I don't know if I'm the one to say it or if it was like Blurred or one of the guests I had on, but could the right decision be Moira sees mutants are about to be exterminated, and she makes a decision to give herself the mutant gene again? Or she gives her, she resurrects herself through mutant protocols or whatever in order to become a mutant again, in order to resurrect in an 11th life that keeps mutant kind safe, that prevents mutant kind's extinction. I think that is an ultimate end, not to reference the bad Ultimate Comic series, but that is an ultimate end where Moira could be redeemed. Right? She could actually make the right decision, actually prevent mutant kind, maybe see, I don't know if it's seeing the error of her ways or seeing Proteus, her son, or having some sort of emotional connection to mutant kind and being like, this isn't really what I want. This isn't what I want. Maybe I actually can save mutant kind. In order to do that, I have to become a mutant again and I have to resurrect mutant kind. Like I feel like Moira having her mutant power taken from her resurrection taken from her, in some ways is like, I feel like she would view that right now as like a gift for Mystique and Destiny. Like, it messes with her survival protocols, but I don't think she wants to be a mutant with that particular power set, So yeah, I think that's the way you possibly redeem Moira, but it's hard. Like, that is hard. It's not going to be an easy thing, because, like, right now, like, the transition of this book is she is the number one enemy of Krakoa. They just don't fully know it yet, but they're probably about to find out. All right, because like here's the thing: is like Phalanx Logan like can tell all the Wolverines, like he can say this is the future I'm from. Moira's evil. Here's why. They can get all this information next issue, which I'm on one hand I really want to see like Phalanx Logan be like, here's the story of how Moira did it. Like I think that'd be pretty cool, right? All the future timelines, the build up to that final moment in year 1000. At the same time, that potentially takes some of the mystery out of it. So it's like I want to see it, but I don't. We'll see. All right, we got a comment here from Adrian, super chat. Thanks so much for the donation. It says, not feeling this issue. Where is Banshee? Why is not? I'm not sure what the rest of that is, but where is Banshee? Well, Banshee he was with the Secret X-Men on their interplanetary mission, right? With headed up by Sunspot and Cannonball. He did not quite make the X-Men roster, but Banshee's bouncing around. Banshee's fine. Don't worry about good old Sean. He's hanging out. I would like to see, we for My Marvel this year, the podcast where we go through the history of Marvel from its origins to today. We're in the mid 90s right now, which means we're reading some Generation X. If that sounds fun to you, come join the reading club. It's just My Marvel this year is the podcast. But Banshee as the leader of Generation X school with Emma Frost, it's a really cool look for Banshee. I really love those early Lobdell and Bocello stories, and I would like to see a Generation X book revival. Like that would be a nice Krakoa era edition, I think, that we have not seen yet. So, but don't worry, I think we will see Banshee. Probably not in X Deaths. I'm going to make that prediction. No Banshee content in X Deaths moving forward. Jason says in the super chat, and thanks so much for the donation, says, would have just loved an explicitly Moira X book exploring her lives and characters like Rasputin and Cardinal. Yeah, I mean, the number one book I wish we had gotten. I still want an Arakko specific book, I think would be super cool. Less cool now that it can't be Hickman's new X-Men, but a Moira X book would have been the one. I mean, absolutely. And like, I think it's a thing that like they kind of had plans for and tried to make happen. I think Hickman talked on the Explain the X-Men interview that like Al Ewing was going to do it at one point. And like he asked Mike Carey to do it, and Mike Carey didn't want to or was too busy or whatever. So like they've had writers possibly attached to it, and just the timing didn't work out, and then the pandemic hits and it messes up scheduling and all that stuff, and it just never happened. So I feel like there is an alternate reality. There's a lifeline where that book did happen, and I feel like the whole line is stronger as a result. But we did not get it. And it does increasingly feel, I talked about this before, but it's like, if that book gets announced and it happens, obviously I still want to read it, especially if the creators involved seem cool. But it's definitely not the right time anymore. It just kind of isn't. But it could be, right? If you keep building up Moira as like the ultimate antagonist of the X-Men now, well then it's, hardly different from doing a Magneto solo or an Apocalypse solo or a Mr. Sinister solo or all these possible books that could be out there, right? And just looking at like, okay, let's dive deep on Moira. There's still going to be opportunity for that. I think the best opportunity, yes, it would have been over the past couple of years. But again, it's a sunk cost. But I do agree that would have been amazing. All right, let's take a few more questions and then we gotta go. Let's see. Just the comment, Gaia Deep Dive. I don't know what that's about, but it reminds me that I've been playing Horizon Forbidden West, and it rules, and I love it. And I've played Horizon Zero Dawn maybe more than any other game because my son likes watching the hunting of the dinos. So big rec for Horizon Forbidden West when I rarely have time. I've actually got a break here in between comics creator interviews and Hickmania. Spoiler alert, Hickmania number 3, the series where we're going through writer Jonathan Hickman's creator-owned works from Nightly News through to present day. For number 3, I'm skipping the creator-owned Transhuman because it's not good, and I'm doing instead the Marvel book, Ultimate Comics Ultimates. Talking with Zach and Charlotte from My Ultimate Year. We recorded that this morning. It was super fun. That's going to be Hickmania number 3. So definitely like and comment, subscribe to the channel and all that stuff if you want to see us talk about Ultimates in depth. I could believe it, but I was surprised rereading Hickman's Ultimates how X-Men heavy it is. Like how much stuff is in there that's like, oh, we should have seen this Children of the Vault stuff coming. Clearly he loves it. He literally just did it in Ultimates a decade ago. We could have seen some of these things coming. That definitely I did not. Had I been paying more attention to Ultimates. But yeah, stay around for that one. All right, let's see. What other final questions do we have? I think Omega Wolverine was sent by Doug, Warlock, and Krakoa. Since he came in from a Krakoa pod and it's technically part machine, what are your thoughts on this theory? That's an interesting theory, and it makes sense, but for, Wolverine was a prisoner in year 1000 in the Preserve, like in this future timeline. So are Doug, Warlock, and Krakoa, like, I mean, you could have a thing where, like, that Warlock and Krakoa combo, I forget what they call him. No, it's not North. That's the Magneto guy. I forget what they call him, but in Powers of 10, like, you could have that into the future, and they're, like, stealthily sneaking around there, and they're the ones who get Wolverine out. That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. I don't think Doug makes it that far, but I guess maybe Warlock, absorbs some of Doug's consciousness, and he survives that far into the future. I'm into it. I'm into that theory. That'd be cool to see play out for sure. All right, what else do we got? Any final questions? When will you explore his F4 in Avengers in Hickmania? I mean, that's the thing is like, so the project is not me talking about his Marvel stuff. I'm talking about creator-owned Hickman stuff. I'm talking about, we're going to be talking next about A Red Mask for Mars. We're going to get into the Manhattan Projects and East of West and Black Monday Murders. The reason for that is there is comparatively a dearth of commentary about those works. And frankly, it's more fun for me to either explore for the first time or re-explore those, as opposed to definitely rereading runs I've read before, like his Fantastic Four. Now, having done the Marvel Ultimates thing is kind of okay, I don't want to do Transhuman, maybe we'll do this. Like, yeah, it is fun to go back to those. So there's a possibility that I could maybe touch on Fantastic Four and, like, giving the people what they want. But in the meantime, that is not the plan. The schedule is talking about Jonathan Hickman's creator-owned works. They're very good. They're very good. They're just not Marvel things. So I would definitely recommend checking it out if you are typically just in the Marvel verse. But it is not the plan currently. Okay. What else? I don't think Omega Sentinel is Moira because Sentinel says she came back to her existing body and awakened earlier than normal. Okay. Okay. That does create a challenge, for sure, to the Moira-Sentinel theory. Moira's a big liar. Could be a lie. Doesn't want to reveal it yet, but that is potentially a challenge. Have to look into that. Do you think we'll get another Moira Lifeline timeline and or Omega Sentinel Lifeline timeline data page in X Deaths number 5? That's a good question. I mean, I hope so. Well, I do and I don't, because the timelines thing is like, you don't want to open up the timeline things to go too deep. I don't think. We already have 10 lifelines. I don't want an additional 10 timelines on top of that. Time travel already gets confusing. It already gets messy. You already start opening up holes and things where if we actually start thinking about, wait, how does this happen and how does this work? It gets messy and just maybe can take you out of the experience of just enjoying the story, right? So I feel like 3 is the number of timelines that I can like stomach and can picture creatively fulfilling a story. Could we get a timeline C and still enjoying it? Yeah, we could. So, like, could this all be coming from timeline C? I think we have to consider the possibility. I do kind of like the idea, though, like I talked about, that it's all A and B, but now it's B influencing A. You know what I mean? Does that mean it becomes an alternate C? Blah, blah, blah. Yes. Do we get another Moira Lifeline? I think we do, but I think it's my endgame theory, which is she makes the right decision. She, re-ups as a mutant and resurrects. So I do think we will get an 11th Lifeline. We're going to see that white page of the death of Moira X that Hickman threw into Inferno as a fake out. We're going to see that page again, but it's going to be real. I'm confident of that. Langdon asks, and thank you for your support, Langdon, are we headed toward a mutant civil war? How so? How so? I mean, yeah, I mean, that's kind of always on the cusp, especially right now, with the Quiet Council just being totally fractured and this idealistic every mutant come together thing with Krakoa. I mean, that's how I thought Inferno was going to shake out, and obviously I talked about that a lot. I did think it would end in Civil War. I thought it would end with Mystique and Emma and all these different factions sort of creating their own island paradises. I don't think we're that close to that yet. I don't think this creative sort of roster wants to be playing in mutant Civil War space because they want to keep doing the Krakoa thing. And you can't do the Krakoa thing, and you can't have a Quiet Council book like we have if I mean, you can, but like it'd be different, right? And I think they're still too set on keeping Krakoa somewhat standard. But it would be interesting if like a phase 2 of this is Mutant Civil War, in addition to some other stuff. So I'm game for that for sure, but I don't think we're there yet. All right, I'm going to take one more question. Let's see. What would happen if Moira was killed, then resurrected on Krakoa? Well, I think right now, because her mutant gene has been removed and she's, human, I think right now she could be resurrected as a mutant. They should have the backups. They've got whatever Scarlet Witch's magic thing is. So I think like if she was killed, nothing would happen. But then if she was resurrected, she could be resurrected as a mutant, and that would allow her then to be killed again, resetting the timeline. What a gift! What a gift! All right. So I think that's gonna do it for now. Moira-Sentinel, I'm still pulling for it. That's my big theory of the day. Hopefully this straightened out some of the lifeline and timeline conversation for anyone who was confused about it. Is Karima a ghost in Moira's shell? I haven't read or seen Ghost in a Shell, but yes, that's how we square that circle. Karima is a ghost in Moira's shell. You heard it here first. Good comment, Bill. All right, so thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate you all joining live. These are fun. I'm here every Wednesday doing Casual Krakoa. Again, with X Lives and X-Men Roundup, we'll be back next week if there's enough to talk about. But in the meantime, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining, and enjoy the comics.